Hi, welcome to Angel's Nook. A lot of us are looking at home decor items that we put through our homes. If you did your whole house in very cool colors for farmhouse, you may be looking at everything in your house going, well, wow, great, now they're going to warm colors, but I don't want to completely redo my house. So how can I incorporate some warmth into my farmhouse palette without completely redoing everything? This is an example of that. This piece is very rustic, on the very most rustic side of farmhouse. It's had a hard life. It's got some rust in it, it's bent. And along these sides, all of this finish, this is all rough. It was probably hit with a wire brush while it was still freshly painted to get this chippy appearance on here. So this is not something I want to just degloss and paint. I'm going to have to sand these areas smooth, which hopefully is not going to take a long time. And this poor thing has been bent. It was not mine, it was a find, but it's been bent in shape. So that needs to be straightened. So that's going to require taking this completely apart and getting it ready to work. So it's going to be great when we get done with it, and it'll be a much warmer palette. I've chosen some gradiated greens for this, and I'm also going to be incorporating some copper into it, which also adds some warmth without completely going against a cool palette that you might have. So let's get started on it. When we took this apart and looked at all the components of it, we realized that here at the top of this section, the top was uneven. So we added a washer between this piece and the base that will be hidden, and it will also be painted the same color as the underneath here. The top piece here is actually welded slightly at an angle, so there's really no way to correct that. But now, instead of this being all wonky, if you look at it going all the way around, everything is pretty level. This piece, the underneath, this one had been really bent. So this, the bottom, was hammered over a block to get the pieces that are on the underneath. So I can get this out of here. Each one of these pans has cross pieces welded onto it. And so these were bent in this top one. So placing it over a hard block, this was pounded down with a mallet to get this back even again. And you can see the small washer that has been added that evens out the unevenness of the metal under here, where that they put this piece in. So that's going to make this where we're ready to start working on the finish. We actually tried sanding this. It will sand off, but it's going to take a lot more labor than we want to put into it. So we're going to use a wire wheel on a drill bit and just knock this all off, because it will take it off really fast. These have all now been wire brushed. All of the paint is off of them. You can see on the edges here, it's completely smoothed out. And on the inside where there was rust, that has also been hit with the wire wheel. So now they're ready to be deglossed. I'm using the wipes. These pieces I have only sanded just where there was chipped paint. It didn't need anything else. This is smooth now. This area is smooth, and I didn't go down. This is metal as well. I didn't go all the way down to bare metal. All I need is for this to be smooth and not show chips underneath the new coats of paint that go in there. These weren't as bad because they didn't have all the grime on them or the Paintplex from getting this sanded down. So now what needs to be done on this, because there was rust, there are areas here, you can see this was a bad spot of rust. There was some coming up in here, and there was a little bit over here. Those areas need to be sprayed with a rust inhibitor primer. The whole thing does not need sprayed, just those areas. The trays have had some primer sprayed in on the areas that needed it. They're dry, so now it's ready to have paint added to it. When you're painting something, especially something decorative, you have to think about the order in which you're going to apply the paint to make it the easiest for yourself. I want the base of each of these trays to be this creamy white that is a warm white with just a slight tan undertone. It's called Almond by All-in-One Paints. I'm going to be using an art brush to put it in here. I can do it quickly. All I'm doing is the bottom here, and I can easily add enough paint in just as though I were using the big round brush, but it makes no sense to fill the round brush full of paint when I'm doing something this small. And I will use the roller, and I will also use a piece of the True applicator to stipple into the edges of this. You can see even with this brush, I'm loading a good amount of paint on here. I'm going to go in with the True applicator piece and hit those corners because the roller cannot get in here. And just making sure that my last ounces on this are popping bubbles. I could just use the True applicator on the whole thing, the piece. At this point, now that I've gotten that side, those edges stippled, it's easier to just quickly use the roller. Let this dry, come back and put another coat on it. I will wash my roller in between and the True applicator piece, but I will wrap the brush. The base of this has dried. It's a beautiful smooth finish. There are no brush marks, there's no texture. It's gorgeous. What I'm going to put on this bottom tray is a dark slate green called Envy. And one of the things I wanted to show you is that when these sample jars come, they have a seal on the top of them. But then if you go to close it later, the jar is just plastic on the inside. If you just close your paint jar with that, in all likelihood, it's going to dry shut from any paint that got on the rim. So what I do is I double a piece of saran wrap, put it on there, and then put the lid on to put this away for storage. That acts like a seal to keep air from leaking underneath the lid and into your can of paint. One of the things you have to think about when you're painting a project is the order in which to do the colors. I did the white first because it's going to be easier for me to get a band of the dark green in here by having the white already done. And by letting a little bit of the white go up on the edges, I'm also giving it space that if I don't have to get the green all the way into that crack seam. So I'm going to initially use a very small 1/2 inch angled art brush so that I can get right against that edge without going into the white. And you have to be patient doing this And if you haven't done this before, practice on something else. The long point of my brush is what I'm putting against the edge there. Well, that's going to have to be touched up. If you get a drip, run your brush over it so it doesn't wind up being a bulge. Then I'm going to take the roller, point side down. I'm not trying to get all the way to the bottom. Very, very lightly touching it with this roller just to skim over those bubbles and get them to pop. And then the last thing I'm going to do is this upper rim with just the roller in case I have any paint that's come up over the side of it. Now I'm going to use paint can. Flip this over. This one's a little easier because it has legs. The others are going to be a little harder. The bottom of this is in good shape. I'm not really concerned about painting the whole bottom of this. I will paint the legs when I get to that point, but I'm not going to paint the whole bottom of this particular one because it's not going to show. My second roll is barely touching so that I can look for the bubbles. You can try both directions to get those, but don't rub hard. This is metal, so it's going to take it longer to dry. I'm going to continue the process, putting Crete on this one. When I get to this one, I will show you how I'm going to mix colors to get a little bit different color for the top. It's going to work a little bit like an ombre, darker to a little lighter to a lot lighter at the top when this is done. All right, we'll let this dry, then I'll work on the others. I really like Woodlands, but when it dries, it is much darker than what I really want for the top tray. So I'm going to mix some Woodlands with some Almond to lighten it. And I'm pretty sure that what I want is 2 parts of the Woodlands to 1 part of the Almond. I won't need much paint, so to do this tray, so 1 of these to half of 1 of these may be enough. No, I need to go ahead and do it 2 tablespoons or I won't have enough on my brush. I could have mixed this on paper plate, and if I were doing a large surface, I would definitely have mixed my ratios on a paper plate first so that I would be able to accurately remix them. But in the case of this, I'm not expecting to need to paint anything else with this exact color. I just need it lightened for what I'm doing. So now I'm going to take the 1 part of Almond and I will scrape some of it out to get as much of it out of here as possible. Both of these paints were stirred before I started using them, and yes, this is coming down to exactly the color I wanted because it will, let's see if I can get this out of your way, or where the best place is to show you. I guess under this camera, you can see this is significantly lighter than this, but it's still in the same color tone. But I need to really, really mix it. And it will dry, this dries darker like you saw on the paper. This will dry darker. But I know I've got the color that I really wanted for this. All right, same process on this little guy. Going into the inside. The top two trays needed painted underneath because they are going to be visible. This has a groove in it, which is why I'm rolling it at a diagonal in a couple of places to get bubbles out. This was small enough that I didn't have to roll the bottom before doing the sides because I could get the paint on quickly enough that it wasn't going to be a problem. We'll let that dry. And it'll be ready for its second coat, and I will cover this with saran going all the way down into the cup so that this does not dry out between coats, because this is metal, it's still chilly here, it's still rainy, so it's going to take a little bit more time on the metal for it to dry properly so it doesn't lift when you put the second coat on. Once it's fully dry, it's highly durable, it's not going to peel off, it's not going to chip, but that initial drying time, it needs more because it has nothing to soak into. The only way that the liquid can evaporate out of the paint to dry is coming up from the surface out through the paint. Looking at the woodlands that has been lightened, I realized, one, I have plenty of paint to do something else with it, but not plenty of paint to really store it. So I realized it's pretty perfect for the base color that I want for what I want to do to these pieces. This part will not need to be painted because that is what fits inside the pieces. But I can also show you how I do spindles to make them easy, because this is in effect working like a spindle. Just like anything else that you're painting, be liberal with the paint. But you can see the roller has taken care of the grooves as well. And this is a good first coat over black. I had lightly sanded just areas that had some chipped paint off of this metal, because my goal is to make this not look like metal, but when I'm done with it, for these metal pieces to look like they are wood. Anything slick, like metal, plastic, laminate, your stippling with the roller has to be really gentle. I'm just skimming the top of those bubbles. And these are ready to dry as well. They'll need a second coat. Pardon me. They'll need a second coat, and that should be all they need, especially since I'm going to put another finish over this as a faux finish for wood. The edge along all of these trays where they were banded together and welded is a very rough edge. I had some paint come up over here from tipping the pan toward the cameras to help you see. I could not see precisely where my brush is. So I'm going back with a very, let's see if I can get my hand under it so you can see the tip better. A very tiny round art brush, not a craft brush, an art brush. A craft brush is not going to hold its tip well enough to let you do the detail work to go back in here. This also, it would not have been helpful. Some people may think that, well, maybe you could have just put caulk in there. It really would have given a much harder to make round surface than doing this. And when you see me tapping my brush, that acts as a stippler. I'm putting a good amount of broad paint on the top tip of the brush, just the tip. And then as I go along, fill this, and I'm barely touching that to smooth it out, and going back and pouncing on that. You also need to be sure to move out of shadow so that you can clearly see anything that may not have fully coated. Usually one coat with this will take care of it. This was another spot that had a brush of green on it, and right here. And now I'm just using the side of my brush because there was still paint in it. I could pounce off of here. And this, once it dries, is going to be ready for the next step. One of the things I didn't show you, because I did the second coat of this color off camera, to save paint that you have a very small amount of and you want to make sure it doesn't dry out, I push the, let's see if we can see in this camera better. I push the saran wrap down in here, but not pushing into the paint itself. But that way it's keeping as much air out as possible. It's sealed up here, and I can use it for a couple of days that way. I'm still not sure I'm done with this color, so I'm keeping it wrapped to use if I need it. You could leave the trays as they are, and it would be perfectly fine. But I want to add some texture to this. And what I have decided is I want the middle green, the Crete, to be lightened some, and for that to be the color that I do the dry brushing with. So I have both my Almond and some Crete here, and I'm going to add it a little bit at a time. And that may be actually all I'm going to need. Because that color right there yes, it will show up on the Crete, it will show up on the Envy, and it will show up as a green on this. I don't need a lot of it. And I'm going to do, while I'm working on the inside, I'm only going to do half of this bristle brush here because I don't want it, the whole thing, to have paint on it, so I can get to the inside and hopefully stay off of the white. You'll be able to see the outside really clearly. I need to be able to see this so that I don't get into the white. You saw I pounced most of it off. You can see it's starting to pick up some texture here. This Bottom one is going to be my easiest. Now I'm going to put it on the whole brush. Bounce as much off as you can. What that does is it gets the excess paint off and it distributes it between the tips. One of the things I did to prevent the bristles of a chip brush from coming out is I knocked it back and forth across my hand numerous times before I started working with it here, just to knock out any loose bristles. I've probably used a total here of 1.5 teaspoons of paint. If I were doing this on a large surface, I would be adding tentacle gel to it to give it more work time. But I know I've got a small amount to paint here. And I'll use what's left on the brush. Now it looks like it's going to need just a little bit more, just to hit those places. And I've got a couple places in here that this brush I'm going to hit. Can you give me the Windex, please? Honestly, don't know of another paint you could take Windex to this soon after painting it and not wind up with paint off. This didn't take paint off. It just, well, it did take paint off. It took what I had just accidentally brushed on there with the edge of the brush. But now this is ready to dry. I have opened a brand new can of the Toasted Oak stain. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough over the base color that I put on this to give me the wood look I want, or if I'm going to have to layer some other colors with it. But I also want you to see if I can get this under. Oh, there we go. This is not mixed right now. There is a clear liquid here. This needs, you don't want to open this up and start using it without very gently stirring it to mix that. And never, ever, ever do you want to shake an oil-based product. You get bubbles into the stain that you just can't get them out, and then that's in your finish. Or you have to let your stain sit for days till those bubbles clear out. These are gel stains, so a little bit goes a really long way. Scraping the bottom. I'm choosing to put this on with a chip brush, but you could put it on with the stain brush. I'm not going to be wiping this back, I don't think. I think I just want the look that a chip brush is going to give. And I'm going to grab the stain that's on here, the excess, put it on this plate. Paint's dry, so it's not going to get into it, and that's going to give me the opportunity to see how this goes on. I'm going to try it both ways. I'm going to see what happens if I take it off, some of it off, and because right now this is giving me more of just full coverage, which is not what I want. Jim, can you hand me a couple of napkins, please? Not napkins, paper towels. So I can pull some of this off. That's giving me more what I wanted by taking it off and putting it back on. We'll see where it goes with this, but I'm definitely going to need some darker brown to get the look I want. But now this is on the larger piece. It is striating the way I want it to. It's not giving me a full coat, which I don't want a full coat. There's hardly any stain on this. If I had a darker color here, I'd be seeing more of the striations that I'm doing. So when this dries, I'm probably going to be adding these have dried overnight to get the stain long enough to completely dry because it is an oil-based product. What I'm going to add to it now is a little bit of vintage brown. I opened a new jar, so I'm just going to use out of the top here for a minute because I may have enough to do the whole thing. I'm purposely using a brush that I have used a lot so that its bristles splay out a little bit so that I can get some lines to this. To give it a little bit more of a wood look. You want to very lightly touch or you lose all of your striations of line. When it's almost out of paint, or actually the antiquing gel, you can go back and pick up more. You can see that's changing that and how it looks. If you get a little bit of a glob like I did just then, you pull your brush up and you just lightly blend it out. Till you get the hang of this, always pounce that brush bristles around, look and see if there's any place that needs more. Keep paper towels and either a mister with water or just Windex handy so that if you don't like what it did, you can mist it, wipe it right off, and start again. And now the pieces have, once they're put together, they're going to look like they were wood instead of a piece of metal, which is more the look I want for this set of tiered trays. When you look at each one of these, there's a nice texture on all of them. And if you wanted, it would be perfectly fine to just use this as is. It's definitely got warmer tones to it. It's got enough of a slight gray in it that it can go with either warm or cool colors, so it's not going to clash if you have a lot of other cool colors. We have from another project copper tape, which I'm going to add as a band all the way around this top edge. And then I'm going to mute that copper down, which again, you could leave it bright, but I want to soften it, so I'm going to add a little bit of antiquing gel to it once it's all been put on there. So this is going to be attached around this. It's been measured around with extra so that there's plenty to I want to get close to the back seam. It's not completely pressed down, so I can wiggle it a little bit to get it between these, and I'm rolling it forward so that I can see it's going to be cranky here, and that's okay because I don't mind if I get some texture into it. This these trays are not completely even with how they are made. You definitely don't want to take the backing off. Completely. As you're doing this, it's a little bit like working with contact paper, and this is super, super thin. It would not have gone on completely smooth no matter what, because there is some texture in the metal. The eraser, this is just an old school eraser. It seals this down. It will get some of the wrinkles out, but not all of them, because like I said, there's areas on this metal that can't be changed out. There is the seam where I overlapped the tape and it's not even visible. So this is going to be done to each of these trays, and then I'll come back and show you how I'm going to put some antiquing on here. This may be really hard to see as I'm actually working on these for what the finished look is and how it changes. So we're doing a close-up for you of both the tape as just bright, shiny copper and what it looks like after I add some antiquing gel to it, in this case black. Brown was going to just kind of mute into it and just make it look muddy, but the black gives it a nice antiquing finish, but you go very, very lightly, and I'll be showing you how to do that. But you can see how very different the two look. The shiny copper looks brand new. The copper with the antiquing gel has an aged effect to it, which is what I wanted for this tiered set of trays. So we'll be showing you that in the next steps. It's not going to take very much of the black antiquing at all to do this. So I used my brush to dip some out onto the plate, and then I've dried my brush out with a paper towel. The black antiquing gel, the paints, the stains, any of them have to be stirred before you start. The antiquing gels usually don't take much to stir them, but do it gently and do thoroughly mix it, or you're not going to have a product that works the same for you. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to get just a little bit on the tip, and I'm going to add it onto this. Looks really streaky right now, and that's okay. I don't want a heavy amount of it, because I'm not wanting it out on everything else. Then I'm wrapping a paper towel around my index finger. And pounding into that. I need a little bit more of it because it's not quite got the look I want. With it in between those grooves, instead of flat like my test piece was, I've got to get the antiquing gel closer to the edges than I did before. And that's sometimes what you find when you're trying to do a technique. The other thing I'm doing is immediately wiping off any that's getting where I do not want it. This will actually be easier to do on the other two pans, because they have an area on each side of them, but they don't exactly fit up against these grooves. So I will also, when I finish this one, show you that, because it's going to be an easier way to do it. I need the Windex back, please. It's behind you. I got black antiquing down on this. I don't want it there. So just a little bit there. There's some there. The antiquing gel has what is called open work time in it, so it takes longer to dry, which means I have time to grab something like that and get the antiquing gel off of where I do not want it. You don't want to go all the way around this before you start working the sections, because what will happen is the antiquing gel will set up a little bit more than you want it to, depending on the humidity and temperature that you're working in. So you want to be able to control your finish. what I had done first, I saw I didn't have as much on there as I wanted. So that's what I'm doing right now, is going back and checking to see that I have what I want. Now I'm going to go around it. Remove any of the overage of the black antiquing gel. It's okay if you have to rub a little bit to get that off. It's not going to hurt anything. So that one is finished, and you can see the difference within it. Now I'm going to work on this one, doing the same thing. When I was originally looking at this set of tiered trays and playing with the color palette all in my head, I had thought I was going to leave the legs and the very top round handle as black. But the more I looked at the copper on the piece, the legs copper and that top handle copper are going to balance the whole piece. So that's what I'm going to be doing. This is the copper metallic antiquing gel. It can be used as an antiquing gel, but it also can be used on something like this or on handles and hardware for cabinets, to any of the metallics, to create a new color for that. From past experience, I know that this will take 2 coats, and I'm not going to be wiping it back. I'm also not going to be stippling this with a roller. I will use the small piece of true applicator that I have. Some things are so small that you really don't even have to do that. You just smooth your brush strokes. And I will also be highlighting this to blend it in. I'm doing the sides of these feet, but not all the way up on top, because these are actually rubber feet to keep this in place on a tabletop. Oh, it's inside. Oh, here's a piece. The back edge, the rounded edge of a true applicator, can make it easy to get into these spots to do this. And you can see just this first coat has because that's already letting some black come through on this. So it's going to wait and see what it looks like. That's how the rest of this is going to be done. These, since they have dried with the vintage brown on them, I like the striations that's in it, but it's still a little bit too cool for me. There's a hint of that green coming through, which is one of those experiments. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. A warmer base on these than what I used for the top tray would have been a better choice. I have tobacco gel stain, so what I'm going to do is add that over this and warm this up the rest of the way. I'm not wiping it back. I'm using the same brush that I used to, I'm trying to stay away from that copper so I don't get that all over me. But this is bringing out a really nice grain line underneath where I used the vintage brown. The other color is creating highs and lows for me, which is working really well. One of the things when you're working on a project is sometimes something works, sometimes it doesn't. So you have to adjust your plan, use what you know about colors, or if you don't know about colors, go down a rabbit hole on Google and learn what colors do. Learn what you can mix to create different colors and go from there. But this is going to be the color that I needed it to be, and still have the look of grain underneath. Just go around it and make sure there's no place where you've left a blob of stain that's not what you want it to look like. I liked the look of the single coat of copper over the black. I liked the black peeking through, but when you look at this and the copper here, this looks more like brushed gold, which would be really pretty over hardware, but not for my purpose. So I'm going to add an additional coat of copper over this to bring it to the full copper tone of this. 2 coats of the copper metallic brought this to a really nice warm copper. And on this piece, I have already added some black, and it's exactly the way I want. I'm putting more black on this, and I will on the legs, than I did on the band, because I want them to look like they have been handled more and tarnished more. So to do this, it looks like I've had quite a bit of black onto this brush, but if you see, I barely get anything on the brush. Pounce it, and then I don't even think about it, but I work my brush back and forth as I pounce. If it starts blurring out, dip back and get more, applying as much as you need to get the look you want. I have to dip more often simply because I'm not putting tons of paint, in this case antiquing gel, onto the brush. You do want to make sure that you go around all the sides, because At some point or another, they're going to be highly visible. Make sure you pounce enough that you don't have big blobs anywhere. And if you happen to see some spot that needs more, go back and add it. I'm going to finish the other leg on this and then we'll put this together. If this were just being used for decor, there is nothing else that would need to be used for it. But if perchance this is going to be used for holding food items or fruit or cupcakes, anything that might be set in here as a display and used for food, those fruits and different things can actually start to get wet, set, you may not know it, and liquid sitting over time on the paint will cause damage to it. So what I'm doing so that this can be universally used for anything that anyone would choose, I'm going to put the water resistant sealer by Heirloom Traditions on it. And because this is not an easy size to roll, I'm choosing to use a foam brush to apply it, because that will not show brush marks, so it'll give me a nice smooth finish too. I will put 3 coats of this on with 3 hours of dry time in between. And the only place I am going to put this is on the inside. I'm not worried about the outside at all. I've used this paint on too many projects over the last 7 years to have any worries about whether or not it's going to hold up. So that'll be done to all the rest of these, and then we'll put it together. It's finished. Everything has been done, the waterproof coating on the inside. And to clarify, this piece would have been totally safe to set food on without the waterproofing put onto it. It's just now the inside of this will be a lot easier to clean, and it will also be protected. If by chance a piece of fruit gets underneath, and we all know sometimes they spoil and make a mess, it's not going to do anything to your finish. So now you have something that's much warmer, but you can still keep farmhouse elements in it. You can add other elements like little bits of coastal into it. You could change it to a totally different view. I'm going to take everything off of it so that you can see the finish with nothing distracting from it. It's a much warmer tone, but it has just enough of the undertone of a slight bit of gray that it can go either way. It's pretty neutral right now. So wherever you'd want to use it, you can. And it's that simple. It's taking something that you already have and reimagining it into something that works with how you're trying to make elements change in your home. It's multiple steps, it's thinking it through. And at any point in this, you could have stopped and said, hey, that's all I want to do to it for me. For me, I like adding continuous touches to it till I have something that is really unique for my home or for someone who has commissioned me to do a piece for them. I hope you've enjoyed this and I hope it's helped you. Thank you.